dump on your face.
You have a big dump in
on your face.
You have a big dump in
on your face.
Does any of that make you regret coming here?
No, I don't regret anything in my life.
Hate to start here. Hate to start here again. But a day later, this thing is not calming down. It's getting worse. Cleveland, this is for you today. Because right now, you've got fans driving right past that stadium screaming their lungs out. You've got people saying out loud they will not spend one more dollar on this season. And on top of all of it, Todd Monken just handed Shedeur Sanders his second snub of the summer. Let's get into it. Browns fan has had all night and all morning to sit with this. Deshaun Watson is the starting quarterback in Cleveland, again. And from where I'm sitting, the sleep did not help. If anything, Browns fan is angrier this morning than they were the second the news broke. That right there should tell Todd Monken everything he needs to know.
Hate to start here, but I've been watching this overnight and watching it this morning, and here we are a day later.
I've covered this city for years. I've been in that city for years. I have never, not once, seen Cleveland this red. Not after a losing season, not after a coaching change. This is different, and it should be, because this isn't about wins and losses anymore. This is about a fan base that feels like it's been lied to.
However, I am not sure, and I've been looking at that city for years. I've been talking to that city for years. I have been to that city for years. I'm not sure that I have ever seen the city of Cleveland more red-assed than they are right now.
Now here's where it stops being a joke. Because Browns fan did not just complain online. Browns fan went to the stadium. Somebody walked right up to the Jim Brown statue, the single most sacred piece of real estate outside that building, and taped protest signs straight to it. Not a chain link fence around the block, not some random pole in a parking lot. Jim Brown, the greatest running back who ever played the position, a franchise legend, and that's the spot somebody picked to make their statement. Read that as a message, because that's exactly what it is.
Browns fan has every right to be pissed. How else are you supposed to act when your beloved franchise takes a big dump on your face?
You have a big dump in
on your face.
You have a big dump in
on your face.
You have a big dump
on your face.
And the signs themselves were not subtle. $280 million, 27 plus victims, 0 supporters, no regrets, in quotes, mocking the exact phrase Watson himself has used. Millions of fans held hostage. And then the line that's going to follow this team around all year. 0-16 was more fun than this.
Attacks Browns fans who did nothing wrong. Yet they're the ones who get punished for it.
It's
of course they're pissed off. So nobody should be surprised that somebody went over to the stadium and went up to the Jim Brown statue, of all things. Jim Brown. And taped protest signs all over it. And these protest signs are pretty awesome. Quote, Cleveland is done with the Haslams.
Now, I'll give credit where it's due. The fan who made that sign got the numbers slightly wrong. It's not 280 million guaranteed, it's 230. Still, the worst contract in modern NFL history by a wide margin. Still, the number that's strangling this front office's ability to move on. The math was off. The message was not.
$280 million, 27 plus victims, 0 supporters, no regrets. Also,
I don't regret anything in my life.
Millions of fans held hostage. 0-16 was more fun.
Here's the part that actually stings if you're a Browns fan. Ask yourself honestly, was 0-16 more fun than this? Because from the outside looking in, that winless season felt like a party compared to the mood in that city right now. At least back then, there was hope for a fresh start. Right now, there's a fan base that feels stuck, and stuck is worse than bad.
The only thing that wasn't dead on about any of that is the $280 million number. I mean, it is still the worst contract in NFL history, but it's actually $230 million. Not $280 million. But aside from that, the rest of it's pretty dead on.
So why is this happening? Why is Deshaun Watson the guy? everybody in that building knows the real reason. It's the contract. It's the $230 million fully guaranteed that this front office cannot walk away from without admitting the worst trade in franchise history. But when Todd Monken has to stand up at a podium and explain it in football language, it falls apart in real time. Listen to this.
What do you say to that, C-Town? Because from the outside, you seem more pissed off now than you ever were during 0-16. Like 0-16 felt like 16-0 compared to all of this. Am I right, C-Town?
Go back and actually listen to the words Monken used. Full body of work. Took in the training camp reps, the joint practice, the preseason games. That's the language of a coach trying to make a business decision sound like a football evaluation. But the timeline does not line up with what everybody watched happen live. The last real look anybody got at Deshaun Watson before this decision came down was 5 completions on 12 attempts, 1 interception, and a podium meltdown aimed straight at the fans. If that's the full body of work Monken is talking about, then the full body of work is the exact case against starting him, not the case for it. So either Monken is being straight with you and genuinely believes a rough outing plus a public blow-up is what tips the scale toward Watson, or he's saying whatever gets him through the press conference, because the real decision was made somewhere else, above his pay grade, and he's the one who has to stand up there and sell it with a straight face. Here's why that distinction actually matters, and it is not just semantics. If this is genuinely Todd Monken's football evaluation, if he watched all of training camp and concluded Watson gives this team the best chance to win in week 1, that tells you everything about how this coaching staff views Shedeur Sanders right now, and none of it is good. It means after everything Shedeur showed as a rookie, after bridging the gap last year when he had to step in, Monken still does not trust him over a quarterback who missed the entire previous season with a second Achilles tear and just torched his own fan base in a press conference. That's a brutal evaluation to sit with if you're Shedeur. But if it's not really Monken's call, if ownership drove this because of the money and Monken is out there defending a decision he did not make, that's arguably worse for the locker room, because then everybody in that building knows the head coach does not have final say over his own quarterback room, and every player watching has to wonder how much of anything Monken says at a podium is actually his own opinion versus a script he's reading off of somebody else's decision.
Deshaun is going to start against Jacksonville. Took in the full body of work over the course of offseason to training camp to the games, the joint practice, and ultimately felt like to start the season on the road, Deshaun gave us the best chance to move the ball and score points. I mean, that's really what it's about. And felt that way going in the last game, but wasn't sure. And after we talked as a staff,
and there's a third layer to this that nobody wants to say out loud, but everybody in that market is thinking. Local beat writers who cover this team every single day are saying flat out that this was completely Monken's call. Not ownership pressure, not a mandate from above, his own read of the roster. If that's actually true, and I'm not saying it definitely is, but if it's true, that's not a small detail. That means the head coach looked at a fully healthy training camp version of Shedeur Sanders, weighted against a quarterback who has barely played football in 2 years and just detonated his own credibility at a podium, and still picked the guy with the guaranteed money attached to his name. Nobody around that building is fully sure which version is real, and honestly, it might not even matter to the fan base at this point, because either explanation lands in the same place. And this is exactly why calling it a snub isn't dramatic, it's accurate. This makes it 2 separate moments now where Shedeur Sanders did the job asked of him and still watched the starting job get handed somewhere else. First, it was staying patient through a competition that some insiders swear was never really a competition at all. Now it's this. Todd Monken naming Watson the guy, again, in front of the whole city, right after that podium disaster. Snub number 2, and Browns fan is not letting this one slide quietly. Now go listen to how Deshaun Watson himself handled the moment he was asked about the reaction from his own fan base.
What are you talking about? He was 5 for 12 with a pick. And then lit the entire fan base on fire. We felt that way going into the last game, and then coming out of that game, we talked as a staff, and we're like, yep, just what we thought. Exactly what we want to see. A guy going 5 for 12, and the one time he does throw it down the field, he gets picked. And then he takes out his gas can and he lights the whole fan base on fire.
I don't think you guys know too, and I think the whole world knows. It has nothing to do with the performance. It's a little bit personal than that. That's a real answer from a real press conference. And if you're a Browns fan hearing that, it probably makes things worse, not better. Because that's not a guy talking about earning trust back on the field. That's a guy telling you directly the booing was never about the football to begin with. Sit with that phrasing for a second, because it matters. He wasn't asked a leading question. He was asked something fairly simple, whether better play might quiet the crowd. And instead of taking that opening to talk about improving, about earning it back on the field one drive at a time, he went straight to "it's personal." In one sentence, he told an entire fan base that no amount of touchdowns is going to fix this relationship, because in his mind, this was never about touchdowns. That is an enormous thing for a starting quarterback to say out loud 2 days before he's supposed to lead that same fan base's team onto the field in week 1. Then it got worse because he brought up the Achilles.
So the big question a lot of people have is, does the Monken actually believe any of that? The other big question, was this even the Monken's decision? And if it was, what's that say about the Monken? Or was that the plan all along to play Watson? Or does the Monken really believe Watson gives them their best chance to win week 1 against Jacksonville? I mean, maybe. It's possible. Look, I'm not saying that it's a great choice no matter what, right? And there are some local beat writers that are confident that it was completely the Monken's choice. Maybe it was. Who knows what they're being told?
Last time I played on this field, I tore my Achilles, and that same fan base cheered when I got hurt. That's the line. And look, I'm not going to sit here and defend anybody cheering an injury. That's ugly no matter who it happens to. But bringing that up in the same breath as explaining a 5 for 12 performance and a locker room meltdown is not the move. It shifts the conversation away from accountability and turns it into a grievance, and Browns fans can smell that shift from a mile away. Think about what that answer actually accomplishes for him. He was asked about booing after a bad preseason performance. Instead, he redirects the entire conversation to an injury from a different season entirely, painting himself as the wronged party in this relationship, rather than the guy who just went 5 for 12 and then aimed a shot at the crowd. It's a classic move, and it's one that shows up constantly with athletes who feel entitled to unconditional support no matter what happens on the field. The problem is, Cleveland has given him plenty of grace already, through one bad season, through injuries, through a contract that most fan bases would have run him out of town over already. And every time, it comes back to the same answer. It's personal. It's the fans. It's never actually about what happened in the pocket.
Man, I didn't have no reaction. I think the biggest thing is, I think you guys know too, and I think the whole world knows, it has nothing to do about the performance.
Last time I played on this field, I tore my Achilles, and that same fan base cheered when I got hurt. That's the line. And look, I'm not going to sit here and defend anybody cheering an injury. That's ugly no matter who it happens to. But bringing that up in the same breath as explaining a 5 for 12 performance and a locker room meltdown is not the move. It shifts the conversation away from accountability and turns it into a grievance, and Browns fans can smell that shift from a mile away. Think about what that answer actually accomplishes for him. He was asked about booing after a bad preseason performance. Instead, he redirects the entire conversation to an injury from a different season entirely, painting himself as the wronged party in this relationship rather than the guy who just went 5 for 12 and then aimed a shot at the crowd. It's a classic move, and it's one that shows up constantly with athletes who feel entitled to unconditional support no matter what happens on the field. The problem is, Cleveland has given him plenty of grace already, through one bad season, through injuries, through a contract that most fan bases would have run him out of town over already, and every time it comes back to the same answer. It's personal. It's the fans. It's never actually about what happened in the pocket.
Last time I played on this field, I tore my Achilles, and that same fan base, they cheered when I got hurt.
No, I don't regret anything in my life. I think the Lord put me through situations for a reason, so I don't regret anything at all. But I had different thoughts on how it was going to be. It is what it is. That's it. That is maybe the worst press conference performance from a franchise quarterback that this league has seen in years. And it is what it is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Because here's what that answer actually reveals if you break it down. No regrets is a fine thing to say if you're talking about resilience, about faith carrying you through injury and hardship, and there's nothing wrong with that part on its own. But paired with, I had different thoughts on how it was going to be, what you're really hearing is a guy who expected this to look completely different by now, and is visibly frustrated that it hasn't. It is what it is not an answer, it's a shrug. It's the verbal equivalent of walking away from the podium mid-sentence. And after everything that fan base has watched over the last 2 years, a shrug is the last thing they wanted to hear 2 days before kickoff.
You could have gone 12 for 12 with 12 touchdowns, and that still would have been awful. Honestly. But you went 5 for 12 with a hideous interception, and then you lit them on fire. But your take is the entire world knows. Knows what, dude? That you're a bad guy and a bad quarterback and a bad organization. That's what the world knows. Yeah, bro, go at your own fans. Great idea. That really shows how smart you are and how much you've worked on yourself. Because you've pointed that out numerous times. And how you've evolved and grown and matured. When you go out, you play like ass, and then you attack your own fan base.
Go at your own fan base. That's the move. That really shows growth. That really shows maturity. That really shows a guy who's worked on himself since the last time this exact thing happened. Or, and stay with me here, it shows the exact opposite. It shows a guy who still will not take accountability, still points at everybody else, and still walks around acting like this city owes him something after 2 Achilles tears and 1 winning season nowhere in sight. And that's the part Browns fan wants everybody to understand. They don't owe him anything. Not patience, not benefit of the doubt, not a warm welcome back onto that field. The only thing on the table is booze the next time he jogs out of that tunnel. And after Saturday night, he earned every single one of them.
Well, Browns fan is making it pretty clear that they don't owe the creep a damn thing. And they don't. Except booing him the next time they see him. That's the only thing that Browns fan feels that they owe Watson at this point. And they're right, of course. They don't owe him bleep because he hasn't done bleep except tank their entire franchise.
So let's tie this whole mess together because it really is both things at once. It's personal because of the podium comments and the Achilles line, and it's performance because since the day this man arrived in Cleveland, the football has mostly been rough to watch. Add in an entitled attitude with zero remorse, and you get exactly what showed up outside that stadium overnight. Cars driving by, screaming out the window, fans openly saying they'll skip games this year, and taped right onto the base of the Jim Brown statue, the loudest message this fan base has sent in years.
I didn't want to start again with that today, but then when I see them taping signs on Jim Brown, not on some chain link fence off to the side or the entrance. Man, they went to Jim Brown. And look at the signs. Cleveland is done with the Haslams and their freak.
I didn't want to open with this again today, I really didn't, but when it's taped straight onto Jim Brown, not some fence off to the side, you go back to it. Cleveland is done with the Haslams and their guy. That's the sign. That's where we are. Now, step back from just this one press conference for a second, because what's happening outside that stadium is not a normal reaction. Fans driving by screaming out the window is not something you see over a rough training camp. That's the kind of response you usually only see when a fan base feels like ownership has stopped listening entirely, when every complaint for years has gone nowhere, and this is the moment it all comes out at at once. Sports history is full of fan bases hitting that exact breaking point. Empty seats, blacked out sections, people showing up just to boo before a snap is even played. And it almost never happens over one bad quarter. It happens when years of frustration finally find one specific moment to attach themselves to. And for Cleveland, that moment is this quarterback getting handed the job again. And that's what makes the boycott talk different from just angry tweets. Angry tweets happen every single week in every market in this league. People threatening to actually skip games, to stop renewing, to physically show up and protest at a statue. That's a fan base making a decision that their voice through the wallet is the only voice this front office will actually hear. Whether that boycott talk turns into real empty seats in September remains to be seen. Plenty of fan bases threaten it and still show up because that's what loyal fans do. But the fact that it's even being said out loud, publicly taped to a franchise legend statue, tells you the patience in that building is not just thin, it's gone. Here's the part ownership should actually be worried about. It is not really about this one roster decision. It's about what happens if Deshaun Watson struggles again in September the way he has struggled for most of his time in Cleveland. If that happens, this isn't going to be a quiet grumble in the stands anymore. It's going to be the loudest, angriest environment that stadium has produced in years, and every bit of goodwill this organization has left with its own fan base is going to evaporate in real time on national television. So here's where this leaves the city. A furious fan base driving past their own stadium just to scream about it. Season ticket holders openly floating a boycott. A statue of a franchise legend getting used as a bulletin board for the loudest complaint this team has heard in years. And now, on top of every bit of that, Shedeur Sanders watching Todd Monken hand the job to Deshaun Watson for a second time after a training camp performance that would have gotten anybody else benched on the spot. This isn't one bad news cycle. This is a fan base that has hit its limit, and a front office that keeps testing exactly how far that limit goes. So Cleveland, I told you at the start I'm here for you, and I mean it. You've heard everything Todd Monken said trying to justify this. You've heard everything Deshaun Watson said trying to explain it away, and you've seen exactly how your own fan base responded with those signs on Jim Brown. Here's my question for everybody watching this right now, and I actually want an honest answer in that comment section. Do you think this really was Todd Monken's own football decision, or do you think ownership made this call and handed Monken the microphone to defend it? Drop one word down there, Monken or Haslam, and tell me why. And while you're down there, tell me if your team Watson gets one more shot, or team bench him now and let Shedeur finish what he started. I want to see this comment section split right down the middle, because that's exactly where this fan base is right now. If you're new here, you already know we've got Cleveland's back through all of this, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next update the second something breaks. Smash like and subscribe.